When we went to our clients and said, what kind of topics are of interest to you? What sort of experience do you wish you had? One topic that came up over and over again was, gosh, I wish we better understood how to innovate.
When I look at companies that are trying to go on this design thinking journey, right, I always run into this challenge. Well, a couple of challenges I'll put out to you is one, really trying to understand what are the mindsets that block potentially embracing design thinking, right? So it's like, what are those mindsets where they prevent people from saying, okay, I'm going to embrace this? That's one. But then two, what does that journey look like to move a company from not embracing or understanding the value of design thinking to having a design thinking culture? I've really been looking forward to this interview just based on the work that we've been doing with your company, with ExperiencePoint. It's been really exciting. And just, I was sharing a story about how we first started working together, meaning ExperiencePoint and Digital FastForward. And I just remember, when Digital FastForward first launched, we were focused on doing design thinking. And we're excited about doing workshops, but then we were like, we want the workshops to be more engaging and interesting. And that's when we came across your company, ExperiencePoint. And I thought it was kind of cool where, I went online, did the search on the internet, found you guys were one of the only companies really that did full-on certification for facilitators. And I remember speaking with one of the account reps at the time. And they said, hey, we have a training coming up next week in Munich if you really want to get started. Right? And I was like, oh, okay. And then I thought about it, and then later that day, I actually called back and said, sign me up. And so that following week, I flew out to Munich, and it was such a different experience in terms of getting introduced to facilitating design thinking that I was just sold at that time and just, really fell in love with the concept of making design thinking more engaging and interesting when you learn it. And so, I think that was the jump off point of Digital FastForward of my company really differentiating itself in the design thinking space, being able to deliver these engaging workshops as a result of the partnership that we developed with ExperiencePoint. So I thought you might appreciate it.
Well, not only did you flatter me around my technology skills, but clearly you're flattering the company here. Thank you. I mean, it feels pretty special to know that there was that intersection and it helped with the differentiation point for your company. So thank you. Yeah, we really appreciate the opportunity to be working with you.
Well, and the purpose of the podcast is really to introduce our audience to leaders in design thinking, because a lot of people that we come across that are interested in design thinking struggle with making the transition from, hey, I took a class, to actually building the culture in their organizations. And you guys are leaders in design thinking, and we thought it would be good to connect with you just to hear from you some of the challenges you've seen, some of the successes you've seen, and maybe give our audience some tips and tricks on how to embrace design thinking and make it part of their culture. And so just getting started, maybe give you a chance to introduce yourself, your background, tell us a little bit about how you got into design thinking.
Sure. And maybe the appropriate once upon a time point for us, our departure point for the story, would be the beginning of ExperiencePoint, because that sort of predated our interest in design thinking. So just rewinding the clock quite a bit, as you can tell from the gray hair. So I met my business partner in a business school in Canada. It's called Queen's University. And after we graduated, we got really excited about the idea of seeing if we could solve this challenge which exists, and that is experience. I think everybody would agree is the best way to learn a number of different topics, right? But there's this other problem with experience. It's also the worst way to learn because it takes so long, right? It's fraught with risk. And what's worse is you can go through an experience and you might either miss the lessons completely or you extract the wrong lessons just because of how complex that experience might be. So my business partner and I kind of said, is there a way for us to use digital technology and be purposeful about constructing experiences for folks in workshops so that we give them all of the good of experience as a teacher and we mitigate the bad? So can we make it faster? Can we make it safer? And can we make it sharply focused so that people do very quickly get to the right lessons? And so that's where our company started. And initially what we were doing is sort of building custom experiences for folks. So an organization would come to us and they'd say, hey, typical case for us was pharmaceutical. We've got a very complex business. Can you please sort of distill it down to its essence and share with people the experience of what this business is all about? And so we would custom create those. And eventually we found that what we really should focus on is building products. And when we went to our clients and said, you know, what kind of topics are of interest to you? What sort of experience do you wish you had? One topic that came up over and over again was, gosh, I wish we better understood how to innovate. And that's a challenging one, right? Because when you talk to people about innovation, it usually means very different things to different people. Like for some folks, it's about, hey, how do we start up a design center in our organization? For other folks, it's just like, how do we brainstorm better? For other folks, it might just be, how do we set up a whole like product group within an organization so that they're going out to the customer and getting good information? And so we didn't really know where to begin, but serendipitously, I had decided to take a year off from ExperiencePoint and do a master's degree at Stanford. And at that time, there was this nascent group called the D School, right? So for those people, your listeners who are not familiar with the D School, the D stands for design. It was started by a gentleman named David Kelly, who is also the founder of this organization, IDEO. And the D School was really all about how do we take some of these tools and techniques that designers use to forecast the future and build for the future and democratize that to others. And so I was really just blown away by the experience there, and it was super exciting. And so through that experience, made connections with IDEO. Next thing I know, I find myself interning here, like probably the oldest intern they ever had.
How old were you when you interned?
Oh yeah, I was 34. So yeah.
Oh, nice.
Yes. So there were other interns around slightly younger than me, but it was a great experience, and it helped me really appreciate a little bit more not only sort of what design thinking means, but also really how to do it well. And so the partnership with IDEO started at that point, and we recognized that this organization has so much great knowledge about how to do design thinking well. I mean, this is what they do. And so we really wanted to understand the specifics of that and then use our learning methodology, our teaching methodology, and share that with as many people as we could. And so that's what resulted in the Experience Innovation products.
So when did you start ExperiencePoint? Now I'm like, now you have me very curious.
Long time ago. So ExperiencePoint has been around for over 20 years.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And so the first almost decade of that organization was really us going in and creating these custom simulations and experiences for companies. And we worked with everybody from like the pharmaceuticals that I mentioned to lottery organizations to healthcare organizations, insurance companies. And so we were specializing in trying to create something from scratch every single time. And what we learned is if we really want to make incredible experiences that connect with people, it would be great to sort of settle on a few timeless topics and just practice doing those over and over again and refining those experiences so that we can ensure that the impact is exactly what we want it to be every single time.
What I love about your story is I think a lot of times we think about innovation where somebody wakes up and they just have this spark of an idea and then they go build this company. And to be honest, very transparent, that's the impression I had of ExperiencePoint is like you guys woke up one morning and were like, hey, it'd be great to make design thinking interactive, learning design thinking interactive and fun. But when you peel back the layers, a lot of times you realize that there's actually a backstory before the, let's say, eureka moment, or there may not have even been a true eureka moment. It's iterative. It started from one place and being willing to grow over time. Is that a common misconception that you see from people when you're working with them, that there's a eureka moment that starts it all for most, innovation?
Yeah, I think you're right on the money there. So many people will have the spark of an idea and they'll get really excited about that idea and wedded to that idea. And it's not necessarily that they have the wrong idea. It's just that all ideas are kind of born ugly. They all have flaws.
That's
right?
a good way to describe it, right?
There was a GE commercial a few years back, and it was a little bit bizarre, but it was about this creature. Do you recall this one? It was like this blue sort of Muppet-looking.
Yeah, I remember.
Yeah.
I think I vaguely, yeah.
Yeah, and so the commercial is making that very same point that, all ideas have flaws, and people look at it, and if it's creative enough and different enough, people are going to look at it and reject it immediately. And what we have learned through working with our partners here at IDEO is that it's through rapid iterations, prototyping, where you really help an idea grow into its full potential. And sometimes that little seed of an idea, or that spark of an idea that you started with, the end product looks nothing like it. Because you've learned so much along the way, which shows you that the solution you really need is something different. And they've got plenty of examples of that with client success stories here. In fact, the ExperiencePoint story with IDEO, how we became their exclusive partner for training people in design thinking, that also sort of begins with, we had this great idea. So when the internship opportunity came up at IDEO, I said to myself, all right, I could send in a resume or I could send in a proposal. And so I thought, I'm going to send a proposal and I'll show them exactly what kind of workshop experience we could build, because of course I had all this other experience custom building things for clients. And so I mapped it all out and I said, here's the perfect thing that you folks should be doing to communicate design thinking to others. And so I had the idea fully formed, and in hindsight, right, you don't go to the world's most celebrated innovation consultancy and say, here's the idea fully formed. So I learned there that they were like, okay, there's something intriguing about this, but we're going to take this, we're going to throw it out, and now let's all go on a journey together to explore, truly what's the need? What is it truly that people are struggling with in terms of their ability to grok design thinking? And then let's figure out together what's the best path to making sure that we help close that gap, close that need. And that's where the experience innovation simulation came from. So yeah, it was a fun journey and a good example of how I very early on made that same mistake.
It's fascinating because I think one of the things that we run into a lot is executives that are interested in design thinking, but like you did, right? They already have the solution, right? So the executive already, he's saying design thinking would be very cool to validate my solution.
Yeah.
And you end up spending time trying to bring them back. But is that something that you commonly see? Is that like, do you have tips or examples of what our listeners can do to help kind of bring executives back from the solutioning initially?
So yes to the question about do we see that often? Because again, like people typically think the innovation process starts with a genius idea, right? And so the way to kind of help out, I think, in those scenarios is to first start with some of the storytelling, right? The storytelling about the executive who had this great idea and then was convinced that maybe they shouldn't take that path, but rather than falling in love with the idea, they should fall in love with a really, really good question. And then, based on the fact that they were able to kind of have that guiding question, they could explore alternatives. They could really explore something really different. And that's what resulted in this incredible solution in the end. And one example for your listeners of that, which I think is okay to tell, because it's a little bit older, is of the largest bank in the US. Maybe I won't name the client, but perhaps you can figure it out. Back in around 2005, 2006, they had this amazing opportunity, which was debit cards were going to be available as a point of purchase tool in a number of different merchants. And of course, the banks get a certain percentage of each transaction when that happens. So they said, we've got to get people using their debit cards, right? More often than they would use cash. That's going to be better for us. And how do we make it better for people? And so the initial idea that the senior people came in with was, hey, IDEO, could you help us develop a money clip that also has space for your debit card? So that, when you pull out your money clip to make a purchase at the convenience store, as we all do, of course, you'd see your debit card and go, oh, I can use this instead. And what I love about this story is that the designers took a step back from it and said to the client, is it really a money clip that we want? What's the real question we're trying to answer here? And so that exploration of the question, finding out what the question is, and then the research and the ideation that they did afterwards resulted in this incredible product, which you may recall, called Keep the Change.
Yes.
Yeah, and so for your listeners who are not familiar with it, Keep the Change is one where you take your debit card, you make a purchase. So say I'm at Starbucks and I buy a latte for $3.50. Well, when you make that purchase, you're actually charged $4, okay?
Right.
The balance, that 50 cents, goes into a savings account for you. So you're serendipitously saving every time you're out there transacting with your debit card. And what's even better is the bank decided up until, I think it was like the first $250 of saving, they were going to match you dollar for dollar.
Yeah.
So there was a huge benefit for the user. So it wasn't just about the bank, getting a little bit of every debit card transaction. It became about the individual understanding what would be valuable to them, serendipitous savings, and then finding a way to bring that to life. So coming back to your original question, what can you say to an executive and help them sort of fall in love with a question is whatever idea they have, there's probably some rationale behind it. And if you ask them, hey, who's the user that you're trying to benefit. Maybe it's a customer, maybe it's somebody internal within the organization, maybe it's a group, right? Who's that user? And then what's the benefit you're trying to confer, right? What is it that you really want these people to be able to do? And what's awesome is you then take those two pieces and you turn it into what we call a how might we question,
Yes.
right? And you're familiar with this from the workshops, right? So it's how might we help this user do this thing? And then
Yes.
with that question, it opens up the possibilities. It makes sure that whatever solutions you start to come up with are going to be user focused, right? And it's not just about your organization and what's going to improve your bottom line. That's important, but you start with the user and try to come up with solutions that are really going to deliver value to them. And I know I've been talking quite a bit here, but like the canonical example we have of that is when an executive came to ExperiencePoint and said, we want to do a workshop around a dashboard, right? We want a digital dashboard that is going to be phenomenal, and I want everybody to come together and brainstorm how good that dashboard is going to be and what we need to have in it. And so we asked them the question, does it need to be a dashboard? Who are you trying to benefit? Who's the user? It's like senior leaders at our company. Okay, what's the benefit you want to provide? It's to give them the information they need to make the right decisions in a timely way. So when we ask it as a how might we question, it's how might we help senior leaders get access to the information they need in a timely way? And that opens up so many different directions. It doesn't have to necessarily be a digital dashboard. It could be a meeting, right? It could be a newsletter. It could be a number of different things. And that's just a simple method for making sure that you get this innovation process started off in the right way.
That's such a good example. That's such a good example. And the reason I was asking is, we work with American University here in DC, and we do design thinking training for their MBA program. And sometimes we get local companies to put forward challenges, and then the students actually focus on the challenges. And we had one very large nonprofit association where one of the executives put forward a challenge. And it wasn't a challenge, it was, hey, I have an idea for this solution, right? And, we really tried to kind of move the executive off of the solution and into kind of work with us to frame the challenge. And, he was very wedded to, I know I want this. And he, to a certain extent, might have actually already communicated out to his team that, hey, we're going to get this solution implemented, right? And so, so it was really a real time, for me, it was a real time opportunity to help the students kind of step back and work with the executive to frame the how might we. It was just, that was probably the first time I'd seen an executive be so resistant, right? And I think what you said, I think is the key is asking the question, who is the user? Right? Because the executive, a lot of times when we run the workshops, I always think it's fascinating when I say, okay, well, give me your challenge, right? Unfortunately, I sometimes end up starting from there or the problem. And it's like, well, we want to generate more revenue. Okay. Like your customer does not care about you generating more revenue. And so, I think that's how sometimes I don't think I do as good as I should or as well as I should. But that's how I end up beating the executive or the team over the head. Like, your customer really doesn't care about your revenue at the end of the day. What do they care about? What's the benefit they're looking for? Sometimes they make the shift, but I think your tips are spot on, right? And I'm curious, I think about when I look at companies that are trying to go on this design thinking journey, right? I always run into this challenge. Well, a couple of challenges I'll put out to you is one, really trying to understand what are the mindsets that block potentially embracing design thinking, right? So it's like, what are those mindsets where they prevent people from saying, okay, I'm going to embrace this? That's one. But then two, what does that journey look like to move a company from not embracing or understanding the value of design thinking to having a design thinking culture or innovation culture? So I'm curious about, what do you see as those steps in the journey, and how long does it usually take in your estimation or examples you've seen? Thanks for tuning in. If you like what you heard, please take time to subscribe to the Fast Forward Radio podcast. We're on all of the major streaming platforms, including iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, and Stitcher.